I think, first of all, I would agree that Asia and Pacific is still very much at the forefront in developing energy transition systems, so it's doing very well. I have to say in 2024, Asia and Pacific invested in energy transition 1 trillion, which is around 50% of the total globally, so it is really very, very good. What are usually the challenges? The challenges are usually linked to policies, regulation, a legal and regulatory framework. This is what makes that international and domestic investors are more reticent to go into investment in energy transition. We know that, and I think we have the instruments to mitigate that as much as possible, both from the public and the private side.
And it doesn't really sound as sexy as artificial intelligence, obviously. So it's really about convincing the institutions with the money to deploy to park their cash in these climate projects. Perhaps it's really boiling down to low returns from climate projects as well.
Yes, it boils down to perceived low returns. It boils down to risk, as I was trying to say. And this is where, if you want, multilateral development banks, where public institutions can help with the provision of, for example, blended finance, with the provision, for example, of equity or insurances. So I think that there is a big role for especially development banks to take more risk from a financial viewpoint, to make private investors more comfortable with investments in energy transition. So energy transition is key for many viewpoints, from security, from clean, from affordability viewpoints. So we have to be able to help in all of that. I think the private sector is interested in energy transition, and they've showed it for many years. Look at the success of thematic bonds of all kinds of shape. But there is a need now to rekindle this kind of interest.
And obviously, this tariff trade uncertainty could eat into this sector as well, I would imagine, because it's already difficult to figure out where the policies are headed depending on the country. And then we've got this tariff situation that could actually make things even murkier in a sector that's already very difficult to come up with numbers and really model these numbers down.
You're right. You're absolutely right. We live in a world of uncertainty. We don't know exactly what is going to happen, what is the impact of tariffs, what are the impacts of many other events. So, you know, these kind of investments are usually capital investments, long-term, medium-term. So they're far more difficult to be performed in this kind of very complicated situation. The situation is different, for example, for trading. No, you saw the results from trading companies, especially in commodities. I mean, because the environment is really going in that direction, but long-term capital expenditures do need a more stable situation. So that's absolutely lack of certainty is never good for long-term investments.
And Riccardo, when we talk about the certainty that you're mentioning, actually, there is at least on the private sector side, at least a concern that there's not enough transparency with regards to the risk profile of some of these investments. With some of these saying that there's not enough to ascertain exactly how risky or what the risk-reward profile of these projects is. Can more be done, actually, to creating transparency in order to assuage and perhaps persuade private capital to come in and actually invest in some of these climate projects?
But listen, it is absolutely right what you said. It is absolutely right. And I have to say that look at blended finance, which is so key. Every IFC, which has been working on blended finance for around 2 decades now, for every dollar in blended finance we receive, so in grants, in concessionary funding, we are able to attract $8 in commercial funding. So it's very powerful, especially in energy transition. But it's true that in order to do that, you need a very clear environment, very clear framework. That's why, as I always said, it is really about policy, it's about regulation, it's about legal and regulatory framework. This is where the World Bank Group can really help. It's not only financing or attracting financing, it's to create the rules to make these more interesting. And that's working with government, to be fair, to working with government, helping them to devise what is the future in 20 years, which is very difficult. And at the same time, to offer kind of interest, kind of returns that are interesting for the private sector. But I always go back to SDG 7. No? SDG 7 about energy transition say energy should be secure, affordable, and clean. I think we should always go in that direction.
Right. It sounds like you're also referring to the energy trilemma framework. We're talking about security, sustainability, and accessibility. One thing that's key also that's been talked about at a lot of these conferences is the need for just energy transition programs, actually, with regards to financing. But do you think that in this climate where you're seeing places like the United States perhaps being more skeptical and pulling back, that it's going to be more difficult to actually foster some of these transition programs that developing countries, in fairness, do clamor for because they need more accessible and more affordable ways to getting to some of this climate financing?
Listen, we have to divide what is the political discussion from the investments. I think that's very important. I think that the issue of energy transition is there, like the issue of water, the issue of creating jobs. We are working in a multi-risk world, and we have to understand that. So we cannot think we can do one thing at a time. We have to do everything at a time. So I think that especially in Asia, there is a knowledge of this. There is a certainty of this. They understand that energy transition must be addressed. So I don't see actually, I think that the long-term, medium-term view is that it will continue.
No, we need all of these parts. But Riccardo, I guess the question we ask a lot of these folks at the Prosperity sidelines as well is, we're about 5 years away from hitting the first target, which is, or trying to hit the target of 45% reductions in CO2 emissions. I mean, given all of that's been happening, is there enough time to meet some of these targets really quickly?
But listen, I think there is enough time if there is an acceleration in this. But I also think that we have to be also content with the fact that we have not forgotten energy transition. We know in a multi-risk world is one of the risks, but we have not forgotten it, and we are trying to do everything, public and private, to make it happen.